everyone, it's time for a live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for June 24th through, 30th, 2023. I realize I put the wrong date. Didn't update it from last week, so just disregard that. It's now July 24th through 30th, 2023. So we got a lot to recap because we had so much astrology going on last week that it was really easy to sort of lose a lot of things in the mix, namely Venus turning retrograde, the sun going into Leo. Yes, we're a new season. Happy birthday, Leo. Chiron turning retrograde, and also Pluto square the lunar nodes. And if you recall last week, the lunar nodes changed signs, and now they are in Aries and Libra for the next 18 months. So if you're watching live, you know the drill. Always lovely to say hello, to see or hear or read where you are watching from. I know, for some of you, it's the next day. You're part of the Tuesday Club. You're in the other side of the world, and it just warms my Sagittarius rising heart to see where everybody is in the world. But for me, I'm in the New York City area, and every week we gather live to look at the astrology, and you hear me say every week, the astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. That's not a concept. That is a lived reality. We have to sort of meet the astrology halfway. So how do we meet really big deal astrology? And last week we needed to have our quote unquote ducks in the row. We need to have our lives organized. And maybe the question for you is how are you all doing? How did you all feel last week? How did you all feel? Mars opposite Saturn. For me, I just was exhausted, but there was a lot of great feedback, even great feedback on the class that I'm doing. We are concluding this week. It was sort of a, beginners, not beginners, astrology class where we are unlearning astrology so that we can relearn astrology. So yeah, and that's the way that I use astrology. If I know that Saturn is looking over my shoulder for the next 3 years, I better step up, because that's what Saturn wants in our life. But that was last week. We have a little bit of echoes of that this week. And for those that don't know who I am, my name again is Katie Sweetman, and I'm in the New York City area. So let's just dive right in. So let's just do the recap quickly. Number one, the lunar nodes changed signs last week. And for some of you, you're like, what are the lunar nodes? And I did write a few things about what the lunar nodes are that I think is just worthwhile going back to my website, or maybe you follow me on Facebook or follow me on Instagram, and kind of getting more into the salient details of what the lunar nodes are. But quick download. The lunar nodes, they are 2 points in the sky. They are mathematical points. Remember, astrology is first astronomy, and there are 2 points in the sky that make eclipses happen. But what astrology does is it assigns meaning to these lunar nodes. It's not just meaning. These lunar nodes make things happen. They sort of show where there's this current of energy at any particular time. The North Node is now in Aries. The North Node has not been in Aries for 18 and a half years. Yes, 18 and a half years. You got to go all the way back to 2004, I believe in 2005 as well. And then we have the half cycles. So the 9-year mark is the half cycle. So we had the lunar nodes flip. North Node was in Libra. This was back in 2014 and 2015. But the lunar nodes, number one, they make eclipses happen. Number two, they act as almost like this current of energy, this portal. I know that sounds like a little new age woo-woo, but it's true. And when that energy gets activated, our lives can turn. People can come in and out of our lives. Major milestones can happen. I have a neighbor who had that solar eclipse in Aries, the one that was on April 20th on her birthday, or maybe her birthday is 19th, and I was just like, what's going to go on in her life? And I said to her, either you're having a baby or you're moving. And I don't know, it's not confirmed, but rumor is. But anyway, yeah, this is the things that sort of mark the major milestones of our life. So if you are an Aries or a Libra, and even if you're not an Aries Aries or Libra. Those two areas of your chart are a particular area reflective of a particular area of your life. We'll sort of recap what that is when I go sign by sign. That area of your life is going to see change. That's just what lunar nodes do. If you are Taurus and Scorpio, you had the lunar nodes in Taurus and Scorpio from January of 2022 until just this past Monday. So that's number one. And by the way, I'm doing a webinar. I'm doing a webinar, 2-hour webinar on August 5th to get you, what do these changes in the lunar nodes mean? Why are the lunar nodes so important? What can we expect, and particularly what can we expect from a sign-by-sign look? And the link is in the show notes. You can go to my website, empoweringastrology.com. But let's do a little deep dive in what the, air quotes, nodes of fate mean. Like I said, they're current of energy. They bring things in and out of our lives. So with the lunar nodes change signs, we had, what else? We had the sun opposite Pluto. We had Mars opposite Saturn. These are like what are called aspects. They were big deal aspects. Mars opposite Saturn was the 20th, July 20th. Then I think the Pluto opposition was the 21st. And I didn't really get a chance to get into the fact that it is Leo season. So happy birthday, Leo. The sun arrived in your sign just a couple days ago on the 22nd. For all of us, even if you aren't a Leo, the sun's arrival, it's like the sun is going into its home turf. Leo is the sign of the sun. We would say in astrology speak that Leo is ruled by the sun. The sun governs Leo. But even if you're not a Leo, you have the sun in another sign. It could be Scorpio, it could be Capricorn, it could be Virgo, for example. But this is the season when the sun gets back to where it's at home, and we get to reconnect with the energy of Leo, regardless of our sign. Leo is creativity, self-expression, fun, joy. I know some Leos out there, you're thinking, but I'm not that sort of boilerplate Leo, wants to be on the stage. That's not the only way that Leo can express itself. But Leo gets us back to the spark that makes us us, the spirit, that sense of individuality in self-expression. And Leo is the creative spirit, for example. So it's a season to get back to ourselves, to prioritize our creativity, our self-expression, to have fun, to play, to find our joy. If you are burnt out, this is your homework this Leo season, is to, how do you get that spark going again? And something that we're learning in my astrology class is that everything starts with fire. Leo is a fire sign. It is what's called the second fire sign that ushers us into another set in the zodiac. That set is Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. That's the second of the three sets of signs in astrology. It's Leo season. Happy birthday. And also Venus turned retrograde. And that's what we didn't have a chance to really get into last week. So we had so much going on. So here's a few things that we need to know. Number one, all planets, except for the sun and the moon, turn retrograde. Okay, no big deal. I know a lot of people freak out a little bit when planets turn retrograde, but it happens so frequently that at any time, some planet is retrograde. Jupiter spends 4 months retrograde. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto spend 5 months retrograde. Okay. But Venus actually turns retrograde the least amount. It turns retrograde every 18 months. The last time Venus was retrograde was from December of 2021 until January of 2021. So that's not that, that's not a huge long time ago, but that's a bit of a while ago. When Venus turns retrograde, at least from an astronomical standpoint, it is transitioning from hopefully I'm doing my astrology right, the morning star to the evening star. Because right now Venus is ahead of the sun, and I really hope I didn't flip that because I'm going to sound like an idiot. But anyway, so Venus is transitioning, and sort of symbolically it's going into the underworld and coming back out. And sort of this is reflected in a lot of ancient myths, So there's that. Venus, when you actually plot its retrograde motions in the sky over what's called a synodic cycle, 8 years. So every 8 years, Venus sort of refreshes its cycle. You get a 5-pointed star. So it's the rose, it's the star, it's the pentagram, and how Venus has this, energy that connects to the sign of Taurus. It rules Taurus, and it also rules Libra. So we have the sort of the financial side of Venus as money and property, value and worth. But then we have the relationship side of Venus. This is reflected in its rulership of Libra. This is how we connect and interact and socialize. And just to kind of give you a sense of like why Venus is important, because I think it's a planet that doesn't always get its fair due. It's sometimes papered over as like beauty, which is lovely, but it's sort of as the sign that doesn't have a lot of depth. But we need Venus. Venus stands in contrast to Mars. Aries is ruled by Mars. Aries is the sign that's opposite. Venus ruled Libra, and vice versa. Taurus is ruled by Venus. It's opposite Scorpio, that's ruled by Mars. We need Venus because Venus gives us a sense of socialization. It makes us understand, or at least empathize, with the needs of other people. If it's all Mars, we don't care what other people want. And, maybe sometimes we operate like that. We're human beings. But Venus reminds us that we need to take into account the needs of other people. But on the other side of things, we can't be so accommodating that we lose our individuality. We lose our wants, our needs, and our desires. So this is that sort of duality that we see between Venus and Mars. Okay, so what happens when Venus turns retrograde? Apart from the fact that it's going from the morning star to the evening star, but Venus it's retracing a path over 40 days. Yes, 40 days, kind of a symbolic amount of time. It's retracing this path that's getting us to take a second look, because retrogrades bring us into the energy of the past. It is more of what's called a yin phase. It's receptive. It wants us to go back instead of forwards. It doesn't mean that our lives are on hold, but we have work to do. That's what a retrograde does. So if it's Mercury retrograde, our work to do is on how we communicate, how we think, how we listen, how we choose. But now our work is around relationship. And relationship means different things to different people, but we are human beings. We are social creatures. We are not islands, and we need to connect and socialize with people. So maybe it runs the spectrum of you are in a primary partnership, you've been in a long-term relationship, or maybe you don't, but we all have to interact and socialize with people. So Venus is trying to get us to look at our relationship patterns. What do we value? Do we value ourselves? Are we valued in a relationship? It is very common for us to lose ourselves in relationship, to lose our identity, to lose our individuality, our sense of our wants and our needs and our desires. So maybe that's going to be a theme in this Venus retrograde, is to get back to our desires, our wants, our needs. It doesn't mean that we have to be a jerk about it, like I want this, but it's to really, how do you renegotiate a relationship? Can you renegotiate a relationship? Venus is in Leo, and Leo, again, the sign of the sun. So this is a Venus that typically loves to be in the romance of life. So how do we get back into the romance of life? We enjoy the pleasure of life, Venus, the beauty, maybe even getting into arts, or even if we have a background in art, getting back to our own creative desires, wants, and needs. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about relationship, capital R relationship, but it can also be about money. What do you invest in? Do you invest in the things that actually light you up and support your life, or do you invest in something very different? So sort of look at our energetic relationship, but also our energetic inheritance with the archetype of both Venus, but also Leo, because Venus will be going back from 28 degrees of Leo all the way back to, I believe it's 12 degrees of Leo. And doing so, by the way, it makes a square to Uranus. So we'll talk about that more next in the coming in the coming week. So we have Venus retrograde. And then, we can talk about this in the sign-by-sign guide. We also had Chiron retrograde. That happened yesterday, the 23rd of July. And it was sort of like, typically Chiron talks about this psychic, emotional, spiritual thread that has just always been there throughout our lives. And for some people, it's value and worth. You were born Chiron Taurus. For some people, it's family. Maybe Chiron Cancer. Or maybe you're about 50 degrees, give or take. 50 years old, give or take. And you have Chiron in Aries. It's about really standing up for yourself or your wants, your needs, your desires, going after what you want, for example. So everybody's going to live this energy differently, but it's to look for the subtext of your experiences, your thoughts, your emotions, the things that are sort of bubbling up inside of you, because they go deep, and maybe not just this life deep, maybe even other lifetimes deep, depending on what you believe in. But Chiron turned retrograde at 19 degrees of Aries. So if you've got stuff in that middle point of the cardinal signs, maybe you're feeling this. Or if you're about 50 years old, maybe you're feeling this because it is what's called your Chiron return. So at Venus retrograde, Chiron retrograde, we had the sun going into Leo. And then we also had Pluto square the nodes. So once the nodes change signs, the north node presently is at 29 degrees of Aries, the south node is at 29 degrees of Libra, always exactly opposite. They began to form a square to Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. I realize that a lot of technical information in astrology is first astronomy. It's also geometry before we can get into the fun stuff. But that is what's called a T-square. And we have Pluto making a T-square to the lunar nodes. And when a planet makes a T-square to the nodes, we have to really pay attention to that planet. It can show us a sticky point, a sticking point, something that's in our blind spot. And Pluto, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, it is an evolutionary planet. It demands evolution. That's the thing about the evolutionary planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. We can't negotiate with them. We can show up, we can do the work, but it's happening whether we like it or not, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. So Pluto square the nodes, there's something that wants to transform and reform right now. And that's going to be very particular to your life and to who you are and then the story that you've been living. And maybe it's obvious and maybe it's not so obvious. Pluto gives us the necessary fuel, spiritual fuel, to make that change. And I was going back in the astrology, and I was like, the last time Pluto was square the nodes was December of 2014 into January of 2015. And that for me, I don't know about you, maybe this is sort of cherry picking the astrology, but that was a huge time in my life. And that was definitely this Plutonian pivot point, for example. And speaking about going back into the past, and I was going to say this when we were talking about Venus retrograde. Number one, the last time Venus was retrograde was December 2021 to January 2022. I actually got into a relationship that ended up being very Venus retrograde, but that's another story for another time. And then Venus was last retrograde in Leo in July, August, into the very beginning of September 2015. That was another huge time in my life. I don't know about you. And then Venus, previous to that, because remember, synodic cycle for Venus is 8 years. Go back 8 years before that. And now it's July and August and the beginning of September 2007. Another huge time in my life. So for you, see where there's a thread. Maybe these were not huge times for you. Maybe this is just personal to me. And, speaking of personal to me, it's conventional wisdom to not get your hair cut when Venus is retrograde, but I did it. I typically live a little bit dangerously when it comes to the transits and conventional wisdom. But anyway, so 8 years, was 2007, and that was a huge time. So go back. July, August, September 2007. If you wanted to go even back 8 years before that, I think that was the summer well, here in the Northern Hemisphere, summer of 1999, winter of 1999 for those that are in the Southern Hemisphere, and see like what was going on. Can you connect the dots? Is there any dots to be connected? But there's definitely there's dots. I'm just still personally trying to figure out how those times connect, because they were massive. And it was like the summer of 1997, not 1997, summer of 2007, I started a major relationship that ended. So, but then not 2015, it was just something very different, but maybe related in a deeper level. But anyway, so yeah, that's your homework. What was going on at those times? And so yeah, Pluto square the nodes. How do we take this energy and use it to our advantage? Not necessarily personal gain advantage, but how do we use this energy to reform and transform? Because that's really what Pluto does best. It holds the mirror to us. It holds the mirror to our soul. And when we get into Pluto brings things up from the unconscious. The unconscious is anything in our blind spots. So just a quick recap, you are both conscious, subconscious, and unconscious to varying degrees. That's the work of being a human being. And our work is to get the numbers up so that we are more conscious than unconscious or subconscious, so we can be more in our consciousness. For example, so Pluto might be showing us something this week, something that's typically in a blind spot, something that typically we project onto other people. Oh, it's all about them. It's not about me. I'm good. But actually, maybe there's something that we're not looking about ourselves, because Pluto has a habit of revealing what we have rejected, what we have cut off from, something that, and it could be something positive. It's like the positive mirror is, oh, I'm not creative. Oh, I can't be a leader. Oh, I'm not smart. I just surround myself with smart, creative leaders. But Pluto is actually showing you that deep down inside, the potential's there. You just have to own it. You have to reveal it within yourself. So again, everybody is going to live this a little bit differently. And it's for you to see how this energy is showing up in your lives. And just as something from last week, I mentioned the article in the New York Times about AI. It wasn't AI is just gonna be a great support for astrology, which actually it may, because with astrology and technology, certainly since the 80s, we've been able to calculate charts by computer program, which was a huge thing for astrology. If you wanted to calculate a chart before computers, you had to spend, I've heard people take a half an hour, 45 minutes calculating a chart. I don't know if that's true. I haven't done it. Maybe one day when I got a lot of time in my hands and I want to prove something to myself, I will learn how to calculate a chart by hand, but computers do it, apps do it now. But the purpose of the article is to say that AI can replace the astrologer. You just have the computer telling you everything, meaning not reports, meaning you don't need me. No, it's more like it was just, it kind of got into a little bit of an existential, spiritual, philosophical conversation. It's like, who's the oracle? Is it the machine? Is the machine that's the oracle? Is it the human that's the oracle? But that's a whole other conversation for another time. So this week we are a little bit quiet on the astrology, so let's just sort of kind of quickly recap. It's mostly the moon doing the talking this week. I guess we just needed a lot of time to integrate after last week's big aspects. So this week for, July 24th through 30th, 2023. We start the week off. Actually, the moon is in Libra as we start the week off. And the Libra moon actually picks up because, remember, Venus rules Libra. It picks up on the fact that the south node of the moon is now in Libra, where it will be until January of 2025. Pay attention. Maybe it's subtle, but maybe something that's happening today or a conversation or a feeling is picking up on a larger story that's going to be present into the very beginning of 2025. That's a year and a half now, which sounds kind of bananas, but it's true. So the moon will actually cross between Libra and Scorpio tomorrow, Tuesday, July 25th. When it's in Scorpio, the moon is going to start to pick up on Mars in Virgo. And now that the sun is in Leo, it's a little bit of a different energy than we had last week when the sun was in Cancer. So we had Mars opposite Saturn, which is a very like get your stuff done, do the right thing, like be above board type of energy. But that energy was happening in what are called the 3rd and the 9th of the sun. Hopefully that's not too technical. But it's my feeling that we were doing a lot of talking, a lot of thinking, a lot of like choice, kind of weighing our options. But now that the sun's in Leo and now the Mars and the Saturn are in the 2nd and the 8th, we need to make these choices, these ideas, realities. We might find that when we get into Tuesday, Wednesday, and parts of Thursday, we are really needing to make some things concrete. Mercury does wrap up its time in Leo this week. As it does, it passes by Venus, so it's a little bit more of a social vibe as we get into later this week. And then on the 28th, Mercury goes back home to Virgo. So Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so Mercury is going to be in its own sign. And actually, Mercury is going to spend a long time in Virgo, 2 months, because we're going to have a retrograde. I believe it's in August. So there's going to be a story that starts that we're going to have to go back to. It's sort of like, how do we perceive? How do we analyze? How do we organize? How do we get things in order? And how do we take care of our physical lives and our health and wellness, for example? Believe it or not, those are the aspects for this week. So let's just jump into the 12 zodiac signs, starting with Aries. So Aries, how you doing? You had Mars, your ruling planet, opposite Saturn this past week. It's a pretty intense energy. It has its pluses, it has its minuses, like any aspect in astrology. On a plus side, it's a time for major milestones, major choices, sort of standing into a new position of power and authority and leadership. Like milestones, if I didn't say that word already. Or on the other side, being shown a wall or where something has fallen short by either your own efforts or other things that are going on. So it's like, what was going on last week? Maybe you're tired like me, Leo. But there's that, and then we have the Venus retrograde, and Venus turning retrograde in your sign of romance, creativity, self-expression. Maybe it's going to be a very time over the next 40 days into the 3rd of September for you to go back and look at relationships. Maybe you're in what I call a capital R relationship, a marriage partnership, a long-term relationship that's committed, and you need to get back to that spark, that flame. Maybe you're not in a relationship, and it's like, how do you show up as yourself in relationship? But pay attention to this Venus retrograde, because Venus will make a couple of interesting aspects to Uranus. So it's just trying to create some change and transformation in relationships. Also, Pluto square the nodes, and now that the nodes are in Aries and Libra, hey, you're in Aries. Over the next 18 months, you're going to have eclipses in your sign. You did have an eclipse in your sign back on April 20th. That was sort of the opening act. And now going forward into 2025, yes, March of 2025, you're going to have eclipses in your sign or your relationship sign. So this is a time where, going into the next year and a half, it's very much about relationship, whether it's new relationships coming in, a relationship coming to a close, needing to interact, connect, and socialize more, or establish your own individuality and have the courage and bravery to stand on your own 2 feet. Taurus, Venus is your planet, so every 18 months, Venus turns retrograde. So no big deal, right? Venus is turning retrograde in Leo. Leo is what's called your 4th sign, home and family. And so there might be some theme about home and family that's coming up over the next 40 days. At this point, what is 38 days? And so maybe it's about the past, maybe it's about your relationship with the past, home and family, mom and dad. Maybe it's about your household, something you need to go back and sort of reevaluate something about your living situation, your household. Maybe it is about the home and needing to see, what truly is a value and what is not a value. But I think it's another way of looking at this time is this part of the chart very much gets into emotional needs and sort of the emotional core and emotional stability and security. So you might feel like you're having to really anchor in and make sure you're getting your needs met. The other thing is that we did have, the nodes go into Aries and Libra. The last time they were in Aries and Libra was 2014, 2015. So that's just sort of information in the back in your mind. But now it's square Pluto, and with the North Node in your 12th, you're entering this phase where you have to get into some really deep existential questions. What do I believe in? What do I stand for? What do I think is true? What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of my life? And I realize these are big questions, but with the North Node in the 12th, it's not about the physicality of life. It's not about being the day-to-day stuff. It's really getting into the big questions and the big picture. And Pluto, it's wrapping up 15 years. I know 15 years and something called your 9th. And so you're starting to come to the end of a chapter that's been trying to reshape and transform how you see yourself, how you see the world, and how you live in the world. And again, what you believe in and what you stand for. So really start to pay attention to these existential themes, and maybe with Venus turning retrograde in Leo, your 4th sign, it's bringing up some deep stuff from the past. Gemini. So Gemini, Mercury is your planet, and it's wrapping up its time in Leo and about to go into Virgo on the 28th, where it will spend 2 months. So you're going to see a little bit of a different energy the first half of the week versus the second half of the week. The first half of the week sort of brings to a conclusion a little bit of a busy time, one that's been about play, your voice, really, making your voice heard, for example. And when Mercury goes into Virgo, it turns the attention to home and family. So that's something that's going to be present over the next 2 months. Where is home and who is home? And that question, or those questions, mean different things to different Virgos. And for some Virgos, it is really getting back into these things about the past, about parents and experiences in childhood, for example. And so for some Virgos, it's a little bit more this time and pragmatic. It's needing to get back to something in the household, projects, making sure your living situation is as it needs to be. But Mercury is joining Mars, and Mars has been in this space for, I think since the 11th or 12th of July, I can't remember. But this has been a time where the household or home or family, it's not a quiet time for you. Something demands your attention. It could be something as simple as just making changes in the home, or having a lot of people over, or maybe you're planning for a move, for example. But you did have that big opposition between Mars and Saturn, which is about home, but then Saturn's in the part of the chart that talks about career and duties and responsibilities. And next week, I'm getting ahead of myself, Mercury does make an opposition to Saturn. So this sort of continues something that was with you last week, and maybe needing to make some major decisions, or at least serious decisions, or at least needing to be the adult in the room going into next week. Venus retrograde for you, it's in something called your 3rd. It's getting into these bigger questions about the value of your voice, how people hear you, how do you really put how you communicate, and maybe even how you negotiate and compromise and are a diplomat, for example. Cancer. So Cancer, we had some big aspects this week. How are you doing? And it's worth kind of recapping very quickly. You had Mars opposite Saturn, And for you, Cancer, Mars is a career planet. So what was happening in your professional life last week? Was it a pat on the back? Was it, hey, good work? Like, was it more work, more duties, more responsibilities? Or did you hit a wall? Of course, every Cancer is going to sort of live that and feel that a little bit differently. Then there's, we have Chiron turning retrograde. That's a little bit of a subtle aspect, but that's in your career sign. It's sort of looking at the role that you play in the world. Do people, is there a deeper pain point? Is there a lack of courage and bravery to really go after what you want? Chiron also speaks about the healing work that we have to do. But then there's the lunar nodes, and it's for you just to know, Cancer, that over the next 18 months, but this sort of started back in April, we're having eclipses in Aries, your career sign, and Libra, your sign of home and family. And you may see changes in those two areas of your life over the next 18 months. There could be a move. There could be a change in your professional life. There could be a change in your position or a change in your job, for example. With the nodes in that place, they are making a square to Pluto, and to really reflect on what was coming up for you last week and this week, because it actually might get into a bigger story that's about relationship, like me. How do you connect? How do you interact? How do you socialize? How do you negotiate? How do you compromise? And what's your relationship with power, whether it's a power dynamic in the workplace or a power dynamic in a capital R relationship, or even a power dynamic in how you show up. And so there's a pivot point this week, and it's really to look for the subtext and look for the blind spots and look how Pluto is trying to show you something. It's like, oh, you want power? You want power in your professional life? You want more responsibility? You want the title after your name? Okay, well, first, this is what you have to look at. Leo, happy birthday, Leo. I'm so sorry, kind of got lost in the mix with everything going on last week. So the sun is now in your sign, so you've begun your new personal year, and that's we have to get to the Leo new moon. That's in August, but we will have the what's called the Aquarius full moon. That's the full moon that's opposite your sign next week, which we'll talk about. But nevertheless, happy birthday. What do we got? So we have Venus, which is a major planet in your astrology. It's now retrograde. Venus is your career planet. It speaks to the role that you play in the world, your duties and responsibilities. What do you value in the world? What's the title after your name? And so now that Venus is retrograde, and it's retrograde in your sign, it's to look for the story. There is this direct connection between your career and you. Maybe you need to take more duties and responsibilities. Maybe you need to step up for yourself. Maybe you need to go after your ambitions, but because Venus is retrograde, there's a story from the past. So look for the story, look for the pattern. Maybe you haven't been so good about, standing in roles of power, going after what you want, or really feeling like you're valued in your professional life. So it's the pivot, or the Venus retrograde. It's the work of the past that we have to do, and in this case, for the next 40 days until September 3rd. So there's Venus retrograde. We also had the lunar nodes just change signs. They got out of your career sign of, they got out of your career sign of Taurus and out of your home sign of Scorpio. And maybe you saw a lot of changes in your professional life over the last 18 months since the end of 2021. But that was really activating these bigger changes, these bigger seeds that Uranus had been planting for the last 5 years at this point. Every Leo is going to live this time differently, but this is sort of this time to get very authentic. I realize that word's a little overused. Radically authentic in your professional life. Like, what do you want to do? Like, now's your time. Do it. Life is short. Go after what you want. And so maybe this Venus retrograde really has you mulling over something, and maybe you have to wait till September to actually move forward and take action with it. Virgo. So Virgo, Mercury is coming up to the end of its time in Leo, so that wraps up your personal astrology calendar. And so when Mercury comes back home to you, it's the start of a new cycle. So every year Mercury goes into Virgo, give or take some time around this year. It could be earlier, it could be later. But that's sort of the start of something every year. Nevertheless, Mercury in its own sign gives strength to you. So you're going to have Mercury in your sign for 2 months. It's sort of telling you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to be a leader. You have to go after what you want. You have to be the adult. You have to take care of things. You have to organize things. For example, and especially because Mercury, the reason it's spending 2 months in Virgo, normally it spends 2-3 weeks in a sign, is because it's going to turn retrograde in August. And when it turns retrograde, it's going to be opposite, in this opposition to Saturn. There's going to be this bigger story that's going to start to unfold into September. And so it's for you to really start to pay attention. It's like, this is a time that's really demanding that you take the reins, you put things into organization, you take on more responsibilities, you get your life in order. Of course, it's in order, you're Virgo, but every Virgo is going to live this time a bit differently. And you also have Mars in your sign. You had that really, pretty big Mars-Saturn opposition last week. So how are you doing, Virgo? That said, the lunar nodes have changed. They are now in Aries and Libra, 2 very different signs for you. But that North node in Aries is saying that this is a time for you to get into the deeper emotional parts of yourself. Aries is what's called your 8th sign. So the next 18 months are really bringing up these bigger emotional themes for you. And maybe this is a time where you use this to go to therapy or talk to a counselor or really prioritize your emotional and psychological health. And maybe this is a time that's going to really demand that you do a lot of emotional growing over the next 18 months. Libra, Venus is your planet and it's now retrograde. So this happens every 18 months, 18 months, sorry. Every 18 months, Venus turns retrograde. So the last time Venus was retrograde, it was the end of December 2021 and into the end of January 2022. But it was in retrograde in Capricorn. And Capricorn for you is your sign of, I gotta do the quick math, of home and family and roots and foundations, the past, memories, mom and dad. But this time it's in Leo. And Leo is something called your 11th sign. It's about, the future, like looking ahead, your hopes, your dreams, your friends, your social circle, like maybe even social issues and social causes. So it's very much about your external life for the next 40 days, if not longer, because Venus has been in Leo for a while. Just, I said this in the introduction, but it's worth paying attention to. The last time Venus was retrograde in Leo was the June, July, beginning of August of 2015. And then 8 years before that, it was June, July, August of 2007, and 8 years before that, and 8 years before that, depending on how old you are. So at least for the most recent Venus retrogrades in Leo, go back to those periods. Like, how did they inform, shape, provide a lens, or just something to compare and contrast to? For example, it's not to say that it's going to be the same time. Of course not. So we have Venus retrograde, and Venus will turn direct on September 3rd. It doesn't mean your life comes to a halt, but it's more internal, reflective, and receptive than external, for example. Then there's that Mars opposite Saturn that we went through last week. So how are you doing? What was the friction point for you? Was how did Saturn to reveal itself? And for you, Mars is a relationship planet. It's not just what I call capital R relationships. It's like small r relationships. It's like, how do you connect, interact, socialize? How do you say yes to people? How do you say no? How do you honor your duties and your responsibilities to other people, for example? So maybe there was a relationship milestone, maybe there was a pivot point, maybe there was a need to put things back into order, or maybe you see that something is just not working, for example. there's that, and then we had the lunar nodes change signs that last week. So they're now in your sign. The south node in Libra. Hey, you're a Libra. The north node is in Aries. And the last time we had that configuration was 2024 and 2025. No, wait, 2004. Sorry, 2004 and 2005. And so it's not to say that this is the same as before, but it's just to know that the lunar nodes, they take 18 and a half years to go through the zodiac. For example, over the next 18 months, but this has already been in play, it's about other people. It's about relationships coming into your life. It's having to negotiate for other people to, like other people have needs. I know you're a Libra, but the North Node's in Aries, and it's reminding you that other people have needs and wants, and how do you negotiate and show up for that, for example. Do keep in mind that Pluto is sort of that last revisit to your sign of home and family. We have the nodes opposite Pluto this week, nodes square Pluto this week, and maybe they're seeing a lot. It's like something deep or something old about home and family or emotional stability, emotional security that's coming up. Try to see it for what it is, because Pluto tries to show us something that we typically can't see, or we don't accept. We project it onto other people, but this could be a very powerful week to make a pivot, for example. Scorpio, so Mars is your planet, and it made that pretty big deal opposition to Saturn last week. Every 2 years, Mars, your planet, runs up against Saturn. So Saturn's job is to make sure everything it's in its place, everything's running smoothly, we are growing and evolving, but it also reminds us that things take time. Nevertheless, and that's the process of maturity, what was the story last week? How does that story continue into this week? How did you meet Saturn? Did Saturn show up as the life coach? Like, all right, we got this. Here's the plan. Here's the goal. How do we get there? Did Saturn show up as the parent? Okay, like you didn't do your homework. You didn't eat your vegetables. You didn't show up on time. And it's sort of kind of giving us a little bit of a stern talking to. Or did Saturn show up like the cops? I know it's like a strong... wait a second, Katie, like who called the cops? But Saturn can show us where we have transgressed, something is not working, we have gone against the order. I realize that's a strong example, but this is the range of experience with Saturn. Nevertheless, maybe you're exhausted. That's the thing. Sometimes the Saturn opposition can wear us down. Pay attention to your health and wellness, for example. That said, we have Venus. Venus is a relationship planet for Scorpio. It's now retrograde, no big deal. But in classic Venus retrograde fashion, somebody from the past may show up. It could be an old friend, it could be an old flame, it could be an old relationship, or not literally a person, but that old pattern that needs a little bit of reworking. For example, Venus is retrograde in something called your 10th sign, career, the title after your name, your ambitions. And maybe you need to go back and recalibrate something, or look at the value of something, or maybe even get some support from other people. That's the thing about being a Scorpio, is typically we're very self-reliant. I don't need anybody, but maybe Venus is reminding you that even in either in your professional life, or even in like sort of your ambitions and what you're trying to make happen in your life, you need other people. Sagittarius. So Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter is going to spend a year up until May of 2024 in Taurus, which is your sign of health, wellness, your day-to-day life, your human life, eating your vegetables, brushing your teeth, going to work, making sure all that stuff flows, and maybe it's making some positive changes in health and wellness, for example. And I realize that I'm going to say that every week, because that's the drill until the next year, but that's important for you to show up for that, because Jupiter is saying, okay, it's very much about my real world life. It's like, if I want something in the future to happen, how do I do the work now in order for it to happen? I don't know why I'm thinking about that. I think it's like the Seven of Pentacles, the one where the person is like the workbench. It's like the Seven of Pentacles. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Otherwise, anyway. So you're doing your work right now. And what else we have? We have Mars opposite Saturn. And that one, came across a pretty strong axis in your chart. It's about your home and family. Like, where is home? Who is home? That's a question that's going to be with you into 2026, the beginning of 2026. But also your professional life. Now, Mars is in hustle mode. Mars is in what's called your 10th. It's about your career. It's about the title after your name. It's about the duties and responsibilities that you carry in this world. And it's like, if you want to make these things happen, you got to do the work. Not that you wouldn't, but you do have Jupiter in your 6th. So you're going to have the Mars-Jupiter trine next week. And so trying to make things happen. Mars is going to be in this part of your chart, I believe, until October, if I'm remembering correctly. And so this is sort of bringing you throughout August. No, it's September. I have to get these dates in my head. It's September. It's you're working hard. Sagittarius. But then there's Mercury, and Mercury is going into Virgo. So it's joining the party with Mars, which means it's opposing Saturn. Again, this week, next week, it's hustle mode, getting everything in order, showing that you've got everything covered. Maybe that you are ready to stand into a role of more maturity and responsibility. And because Mercury is a relationship planet for you, maybe this is about a relationship needing to take the next step up. Are you getting very clear about the type of people that you want in your life, and the type of relationship that you want? Capricorn. So you hear me say every week that Saturn's in your 3rd sign, so don't forget it, because this continues to be a time for you to take your voice seriously. How do you think and listen and learn, and to really stand behind the choices that you're making? You have to be the master of your own choices right now, which means having not just the knowledge of the things that you're choosing, but the wisdom of the things that you're choosing right now. So there's that. Then there's Venus retrograde. So Venus for you it's actually a major planet in your astrology. It's your career planet, and it's turning retrograde in Leo, which is your sign it's what's called your 8th sign. Pay attention to the deeper story. Like, what's the theme that's happening in your professional life? Is some deeper fear, a fear of success, a fear of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough? Like, where's the psychological material? Because there might be some sort of psychological story that's coming up that's taking you into the beginning of September that directly influences your professional life. If it's not literally your professional life, then it's sort of the direction that you take your life in. It's the place that you stand in the world. And if there's a part of you that's like, oh, nobody wants to see me, or I'm not good enough, then that's always going to influence how, I know you're Capricorn, you got this, but that's always going to influence how much success you can generate in your life, for example. So there might be a lot of doing the deep work over the next 40 days, kind of that sacred journey into the deepest parts of yourself, for example. Then we had the Mars-Saturn opposition. It's just to sort of debrief, what was that Mars-Saturn opposition for you? Because Mars is your planet of home and family, past memory, emotional security, emotional stability. How was Saturn showing up for you? Was it showing you a line, like you didn't do your work? Like, is it showing up as a life coach? Great, we got this. Let's keep working towards our goals. Did it show up as the parent? Didn't do what you're supposed to do, sort of the reprimand from the parent? Or did it show up in another way? You hit a boundary or a wall, something is not going to work, and it's a hard no, for example. There's that. The nodes have changed signs. They are now in your sign of career. You have the North Node in Aries, which is actually your sign of home and family. The South Node is in your career sign. So this is going to be 2 areas that you see a lot of change in over the next 18 months, because that's what, the nodes make eclipses happen. And we're 3 months away from a solar eclipse in Libra, for example. So that on October 14th is focusing its time on your career. It's about career. It's about the role that you play in the world and the direction that you take your life in. Aquarius, Saturn is your sign. Again, just, it's going to be there for a few more years. So you're getting deeper and deeper into this bigger story about value and worth, whether it's your material stability and material security, making purchases, investing into your material life, or having to do a lot of reorganizing and reordering and recalibrating in the area of your material life. For example, that Mars-Saturn opposition last week was pretty big for you. Mars is a career planet. So what was the story that was happening in your professional life, or sort of the duties and duties and responsibilities that you carry into this world? That brings into this week as well, but it's a pretty hard energy that's trying to get you to be more mature, for example. Then there's Venus retrograde. And Venus is your planet of home and family, roots, foundation. It's turning retrograde in Leo, which is your relationship signs. There might be this direct connection between something that's happening in a relationship, whether it's capital R relationship, your primary partnership, or just small r relationship. Like, who are the people in your life? How do you interact and socialize? How do you get your needs met? Are your needs being met? Are they being valued by a partner? Are they being valued by other people? Or are you valuing the needs that you have in order to create stability in your life? So I think even with Saturn in your second, Venus governing the fourth, Venus turning retrograde in the seventh, there's a lot of big themes coming up in your chart right now. And to see how that is playing out mostly in a relationship with somebody. That said, the nodes have changed. They have left Scorpio and Taurus, thank the Lord, because for you, that was creating a lot of change in the home environment and also the professional life since the end of 2021. But now it's in Aries and Libra. And for you, Aries is your sign of voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. So this is this period of your life where you need to be heard. You need to take your voice seriously, whether it's really inhabiting your voice and having the power of your voice. Also, like, finding your curiosity again, because the South Node, the ninth, it's the work of looking at how you have your what you believe in, what you stand for, and maybe the times where you think you're right and maybe you're not. So that's where the North Node. And Aries is trying to get you to be a little bit more curious, for example. Finally, Pisces. So Pisces, Jupiter is your planet, it says every week, and it's going to be spending the next year until May of 2024 in your sign of voice and communication. So just continue to be proactive about this. Like, how do you think? How do you listen? How do you communicate? How do you communicate your needs? The value of your voice, your ability to inhabit your voice, because remember, voice is two things. It's the words out of your mouth, but it's also your ability to really inhabit your words with the spirit of you in your words, and have your words be your words and nobody else, for example. And maybe you're really focusing on your education at the moment. If it's not education, maybe it's public speaking, maybe you are teaching, maybe you're just really wants to travel and explore at the moment. So there's that. We had that pretty intense Mars-Saturn opposition. So it's just to kind of debrief, like, what was going on last week? Because you had Mars in Virgo, which is a relationship planet, a relationship sign. And you have, Saturn in your sign, Pisces, Mars in relationship sign. And like, what's the story that was happening in relationship? Whether it's a serious relationship, a capital R relationship, or a small r relationship, meaning how do you interact and socialize? How do you get your needs met? Where's the balance? Saturn loves relationships, but it also loves balance. And I think one of the hardest things right now for Pisces, because Saturn is in its own sign, it's on you. That's like the weight of the world. I know the weight of the world's on your shoulders in the moment, but this is this period of your life where it's about you, your needs, your wants, your responsibilities, standing up for what's being asked of you, maturity and responsibility, and how that was sort of coming out in relationships last week, for example. Venus retrograde for you, doesn't have the same weight as the other signs. It is in Leo, which is your sign of, taking care of your body, health and wellness. And so maybe, looking at the value of how you invest time into taking care of yourself, whether it's your day-to-day life, your the foods you eat, you going to the gym or going for a walk, for example. The nodes are changing signs, as you know. They are going into your money signs of Aries and Libra. So it's very much going to be about money and finance over the next 18 months. And then there's Mercury. Mercury actually is a big player in your astrology. It's a relationship planet. It's about home. It's about family. It's about where you live. It's your household. And that's going into an opposition to Saturn. So it's really about relationships. Again, that's carrying into next week and having to make some serious decisions. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology for July 24th. What it says that right there. July 24th through 30th, 2023. Again, my name is Katie Sweetman. I always enjoy connecting with you all every week. I see some familiar faces. I know some of you are my clients. Thank you, and even thank you for coming each week and sort of telling me where you're from, because I'm kind of a weirdo. But anyway, hope you can join me for my webinar on August 5th. It is available for replay for those that can't watch live. It is on the lunar nodes and why they're so important and what they are going to mean for you. So sign up for my mailing list. Go to empoweringastrology.com. Go to the show notes. And I hope to see you all very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.